Hello everyone, welcome to Postcard Buddhism. Today we'll explore the intriguing topic, where are the limits of the desire realm, the Buddhist cosmology. Let's dive into the depths of Buddhist teachings to understand the nature and boundaries of our desires within the vast framework of the universe. Where are the limits of the desire realm? The Buddhist cosmology. Buddhism views sexuality through the lens of craving and suffering. It is a peril that drives people into the abyss of desire and anguish. Behind the body and gender lies the craving. Buddhism does not impose any rules on human society, does not legislate, nor establish a collective morality. Buddhism focuses on the individual, advising people on how to live and practice to eradicate suffering and liberate themselves from the bonds of existence. Therefore, the teachings of the Buddha, 5th century BCE, regarding sexuality are personal advice, not commandments imposed on all of humanity. According to traditional Theravada Buddhist teachings, sexuality, like all things related to the body and pleasure derived from sensory perceptions, is viewed in terms of craving and attachment arising from desire. Suffering inevitably arises from these feelings. Sexuality is often highlighted as a danger or a slippery ground that pushes people into the misery of desire and suffering. The law of impermanence. The Buddha emphasized the concept of the Four Noble Truths as the foundation of his teachings. These truths first stress the pervasive and unavoidable nature of suffering, the first truth. The Buddha then explains the origin of suffering, the second truth, which is craving, including the excessive desire for sexual pleasures and the constant search for those pleasures, even the desire for annihilation and non-existence. Why does Buddhism condemn craving? Because it views craving as a product of ignorance, meaning not understanding oneself and the true nature of one's existence. This ignorance fosters a sense of a permanent self, reinforced by memories, habits, familiar feelings, and especially attachment to one's body. However, all these are transient. Hence, to counteract this transience, people try to reinforce the sense of a permanent self by increasing sensory pleasures and always looking toward the future. Unfortunately, this effort to extend and protect the self is futile, as the law of impermanence is inescapable. Aging, illness, and death are ever-present reminders of impermanence. Sexuality is directly linked to bodily sensations, yet the body is a product of past karma, the result of one's previous actions. The body is often likened to a precious vehicle, a means to enlightenment, but it is also described as a burden or the cause of lust and other worries, hindering one's spiritual life. Are these two views contradictory? Not at all. Difficulties arise from one's attachment to the body, not from the body itself. The body, through its five senses, perceives contact resulting in sensations, whether pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Thus, the body itself is merely a gateway for sensory inputs. Among these, sexual sensation is one of the most pleasurable that the body can provide. There is nothing wrong with experiencing pleasure if it doesn't lead to excessive craving and attachment, wanting more pleasure. The problem arises from our reaction to pleasure, not the pleasure itself. The craving for pleasure and the desire to continue experiencing it is the true cause of suffering. This craving and desire give rise to a series of desires, possession, jealousy, anger, resentment, that torment and blind us. These desires are the root of sin. But where do these sins come from? From our own minds. The key point in Buddhist teachings is that the body is subject to the control of the mind. The body and sexual pleasure do not play an active role. It is the mind's attachment that triggers all forms of desire, which in turn cause suffering. Craving is the primary driver of reactions within the mind. Although the word desire in Western languages reflects the meaning of the Sanskrit word raga quite accurately, it is crucial to understand that in Buddhism, raga, desire, craving, does not carry the positive connotation that the word desire might have in Western contexts. Scriptures define raga as the desire attachment, meaning the strong attachment to existence and possessions, and the craving arising from these. Its effect is the emergence of all kinds of suffering. This definition highlights the cautionary aspect of desire. In Western thought, desire is often seen as a motivating force that can lead to creativity and noble qualities, such as the desire of heaven or an artist's creative drive, but it can also be a force driving one into the suffering of lust. Thus, the meaning of desire in Western languages is ambiguous. For example, the desire for love can be seen as encouraging, even though the consequences of such desire can sometimes be destructive. Buddhist teachings focus on analysis and consider desire attachment as a mental toxin. However, Buddhism also acknowledges a different form of craving, called desire craving, similar to the motivating desire in Western contexts. Sexuality itself is not to blame. It is the mind that must be held accountable when it is blinded by pleasure and becomes fertile ground for mental toxins. Sexuality, as an interaction between two individuals, provides an opportunity for mutual reception. Only when possessiveness, excessive craving, and the desire for satisfaction enter does sexuality become selfish and lead to suffering. This is the core message of Buddhism. Buddhism is not concerned with lineage or marriage, as these are merely forms of bondage in life, relationships between people, and physiological control. In Buddhism, marriage is not sacred and does not require rituals for blessings. Buddhist teachings demand mutual respect, sacrifice for one another, and non-violence. Buddhism does not consider the body and the world as inherently evil. The Buddha advocates the middle way, rejecting all forms of asceticism and self-mortification, meaning maintaining a balance between the secular life and the severity of asceticism, which only further torments the body without bringing liberation. Understanding one's duties is maintaining sexual morality. Marriage is not about possession. For those who have not fully grasped the doctrine, sexual life becomes the main driving force of suffering in the cycle of existence, samsara, from which Buddhism seeks liberation. Based on this view, lay Buddhists must respect themselves and others, and monks and nuns who have renounced worldly life must completely avoid sexual activities. However, Mahayana Buddhism seems more open compared to the strictness of Theravada Buddhism. In the Tantric school, sexuality is transformed into a form of yogic practice and is seen as a method to achieve enlightenment. Overall, Buddhism maintains a very liberal attitude towards sexuality. The path of renunciation. The role of Buddhism regarding sexuality depends on the context and the level of understanding of the Dharma by the Buddhist practitioner. The rules and precepts recorded in the scriptures are considered to be directly derived from the teachings of the Buddha. Thus, they are generally applied to all sects except for a few exceptions in Japanese Buddhism. In Japan, the observance of precepts for monastics is rarely upheld, and today, some monks have families and are both monastics and scholars. In the Vinaya Pitaka, the Code of Monastic Discipline, there is a section called the Pratamoksha, the Individual Liberation Vow, that details the rules for lay people, novices, and fully ordained monks and nuns. Lay Buddhists can vow to observe 5 precepts, 3 of which relate to the body: not taking life, not taking what is not given, and not engaging in sexual misconduct. The exact wording of the 3rd precept is, "I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct." Respecting oneself and others. No one in society is forced to adhere to these precepts, but once one vows to observe them, they must be strictly maintained. Observing these precepts is a personal action, a voluntary act. Buddhism does not prescribe specific sexual conduct to prohibit, except for actions that cause suffering to others. In Asia, the precepts related to sexuality are more clearly defined than elsewhere, such as the prohibition of adultery. However, this is merely a way to limit the broad nature of the sexual precept, which essentially teaches respect for oneself and others. This precept does not specifically mention homosexuality, and indeed, homosexuality is quite easily accepted in Southeast Asian countries. However, sexual acts are strictly prohibited in monasteries. This prohibition is regulated depending on 2 stages of monastic training, the novice stage and the fully ordained monk stage. Both male and female novices must observe 10 precepts, including maintaining celibacy, abstinence, not engaging in sexual, lewd, or impure acts. Once fully ordained, monastics are officially considered to have left the household life, and they are called bhikkhus, monks, or bhikkhunis, nuns. They must adopt a simple and austere lifestyle, a path of determination to renounce the secular world. On this path, they must eliminate all negative actions and cultivate a virtuous state of mind, focusing their energy on studying and practicing the Dharma, the path. Complete celibacy is one of the 4 fundamental precepts they must observe, and any violation results in immediate and permanent expulsion from the monastic community. However, there are less stringent precepts. For example, there are 13 serious offenses that, if violated, result in temporary expulsion from the monastic community. Among these offenses are masturbation, intentionally ejaculating, physical contact or touching women, speaking lewd or suggestive words, inciting a woman to prostitution, or acting as a matchmaker. However, nocturnal emissions during sleep are not considered a violation. If a monastic harbors desires for women, they must immediately meditate on the impurity of the body, as referenced in additional texts. If unable to control their desires, they must seek to suspend their vows and return to lay life before any irreversible situation arises, i.e., permanent expulsion. Acting in this way, they will not be criticized. Conversely, if a monastic fails to resist temptation within the monastery, they will be expelled from the monastic community according to the precepts. For female monastics, the rules are similar, with little difference. However, in cases where a nun is raped against her will and without any voluntary pleasure, it is not considered a major violation and can be forgiven. Although Theravada Buddhism strictly prohibits sexuality, social life in Theravada Buddhist Southeast Asian countries is not overly harsh if sexual conduct is not violent and does not cause suffering to others through adultery. Additional texts for reading. The renunciation of the Bodhisattva before becoming the Buddha. While listening to the musicians playing to pass the time, the Bodhisattva, the future Buddha, fell asleep. The entire troupe also fell asleep from exhaustion. Suddenly, the Bodhisattva woke up to see the musicians still there, leaning against each other, with their clothes disheveled, resembling wooden statues, their noses running, eyes swollen as if they were crying, drooling from their mouths, with instruments scattered on the ground. The Bodhisattva was horrified to see the entire palace resembling a graveyard and exclaimed 3 times, "Unfortunate, unfortunate, I must leave this place." Previously, the Bodhisattva had been attached to the palace where his father resided, but now it appeared to him in this way. Feeling disgusted, the Bodhisattva exclaimed, "Unfortunate." And from the depths of his heart arose the desire to renounce everything. A corpse is truly repulsive. The body of the living is no better. A yogi should see the body as something terrifying, and always remember this. There are 32 repulsive aspects concerning color, shape, smell, location, and distribution, the objects of sensory perception. The excretions from the body are repulsive and filthy. The components supporting the body are the same. Like a maggot born from filth, the body is formed from dirt. Inside, it is filled with impurities like a cesspool. Impurities seep out like oil through a clay pot. The body is a den of worms, no different from a heap of trash. The body is like a boil, a disease, or an incurable ulcer, repulsive and weak, no better than a corpse. A few sexual precepts for monastics. First, parajika. In Chinese scriptures, the term parajika is translated as great precept, meaning the most important prohibitions. No sexual intercourse. If a bhikkhu monk inserts his sexual organ into the sexual organ, anus, or mouth of another person, whether man or woman, or inserts the sexual organ of another into his own mouth or anus, or inserts his sexual organ into the sexual organ, anus, or mouth of an animal or a corpse, even as deep as the length of a sesame seed, the bhikkhu will lose his status as a monastic. Even if the bhikkhu wraps his sexual organ in cloth, places it in a bag, dresses as a layperson, or is naked, and does not feel any pleasure, he still loses his monastic status. The following 10 situations do not constitute a serious offense. When the bhikkhu is asleep and completely unaware that intercourse is occurring. When he is not complicit. When he is unconscious or insane. In cases of possession by spirits and cannot control himself, or if the actions occurred before taking the vows. First, sanghadisa. Sanghadisesa are offenses that must be brought before the monastic community for adjudication and result in temporary expulsion. No intentional ejaculation. If a bhikkhu masturbates or has someone else masturbate him to the point of ejaculation, he must be brought before the monastic community. The bhikkhu should not intentionally treasure his sexual organ, use it as a tool, or let it hang loose. If he ejaculates even a tiny amount sufficient for a fly to drink, it constitutes a sanghadisesa offense. However, Nocturnal emissions during sleep are not considered an offense. If semen is accidentally discharged while defecating, it is not considered an offense. If a bit of semen leaks out while cleaning the sexual organ or applying medicine, and he does not feel any pleasure, it is not considered an offense. Fourth, sandadisa, no propositioning a woman for sex. If a monastic thinks of lust and crudely suggests sexual intercourse to a woman, with himself or another, he must be brought before the monastic community. If a monastic tells a woman that any girl who wants to be reborn under favorable conditions must offer herself to him, he commits the fourth sandadisisa offense. The position of Mahayana between rigidity and transgressions. The precepts outlined in Theravada Buddhism continue to be respected by Mahayana sects. Monastics must adhere to the Vinaya, and lay Buddhists must follow the 5 precepts. However, for a bodhisattva, enlightened being acting with compassion for the benefit of others, the bodhisattva is a unique concept in Mahayana Buddhism. Their ethical framework transcends the confines of monastic rules, as prescribed by Theravada Buddhism, and this ethical framework also applies to lay Buddhists. This moral code is closely related to the internal motivations behind actions rather than external impositions, giving it a more flexible nature while still being governed by specific, clear rules. This flexibility in some cases allows bodhisattvas to act more effectively for the benefit of sentient beings. Therefore, the Vinaya's rules also become more lenient for them. The emptiness of sexuality. In general, the provisions regarding sexuality prescribed for monastics in Mahayana scriptures are fundamentally based on the Vinaya of Theravada Buddhism, continuing to uphold the high ideal of a life detached from worldly matters. Shantideva, in his Bodhicharyavatara, The Way of the Bodhisattva, harshly criticizes the seductive nature of the female body, comparing it to a sack filled with impure and filthy substances. For a female monastic, the male body is viewed similarly. The ethics designated for bodhisattvas are more liberal and free, though still regulated by certain specific rules. This freedom is sometimes necessary in certain situations to benefit sentient beings. In China, the Brahmajala Sutra, Brahma's Net Sutra, mentions that bodhisattvas must abstain from sexual activity, but if they violate this, they are not expelled from the monastic community, but must confess and sincerely repent. The Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra narrates the story of a lay bodhisattva, not a monastic, who exemplifies 2 different attitudes towards the body, avoiding attachment to the illusory body but also using it as a means to help others see the path of Dharma, even utilizing sexuality if necessary. Another passage recounts an interesting story about a female deity teaching Sariputra the emptiness of gender. See the additional reading excerpts. Complete emptiness helps bodhisattvas transcend the confines of bodily gender, provided they achieve genuine spiritual results, not just theoretical concepts, and especially if they eliminate all attachment to the illusion of reality. Legends of crazy monks transcending their prescribed precepts. When Buddhism spread to China in the 1st century, it marked a new turning point, especially in Zen, Chan Buddhism. Zen focuses on realizing the illusory nature of desires rather than rigidly adhering to precepts. However, this does not mean disregarding the Vinaya, but emphasizing the importance of mind's functioning over the constraints of literal words. Legends tell of many crazy monks who transcended the boundaries of their prescribed precepts. For instance, the monk Ji Gong, whose name means true person, was seen by contemporaries as a drunkard and libertine. Another monk, Wonyo, 607–6686 from Korea, was a profound scholar who authored many treatises and commentaries on sutras, but he did not adhere strictly to precepts and frequented pleasure districts. He later married a princess and had a son before living as a wandering monk spreading Pure Land Buddhism of Amitabha Buddha. In Japan, the Vinaya's precepts for monastics were not strictly observed. In the 9th century, the great master Saicho, founder of the Tendai school, replaced the Vinaya's monastic precepts with the Bodhisattva vows. Consequently, monastics in this sect did not strictly follow the Vinaya's precepts. In Zen Buddhism, a form of Chinese Chan, Dogen advocated simplifying the 10 precepts for monastics but insisted on strict celibacy within the monastery. However, this did not prevent the monk Ikkyu, 1394–1481, from renouncing monastic life. He was a highly liberal Zen master who composed many humorous and licentious poems criticizing homosexuality in monasteries. In the Pure Land school, Honen was a true monk, but his disciple Shinran was married and founded the Jodo Shinshu sect, where monks typically had families. More accurately, they were lay people with families rather than monks with families, as noted by the translator. Finally, during the Meiji era, 1868 to 1912, monks were required to adopt a fixed lifestyle, necessitating marriage to continue the family line to maintain the temples built by their families. Additional reading. Excerpts. The Bodhisattva uses the bait of desire, the suffering of lust. You seek the pleasures of sexual desire and enjoy them as a form of happiness, but the disease of lust only worsens. You seek what lies outside, i.e., the body of a woman, but the more you seek, the more intense your suffering becomes. It is akin to someone with scabies. This person heats their hand near the fire or scratches to relieve the itch, but this only makes their hand burn more. During that moment of scratching or bringing the hand near the fire, one might find some relief, lightness, less itching, but in the long run the pain penetrates deeper into the skin. The small pleasure of lust is similar, serving only as the cause of a disease, scabies digging deeper into the skin. It is neither true happiness nor a cure for the disease. Anyone who sees a person with scabies being treated in such a way will pity them. Similarly, someone who has renounced pleasure will react to lust. When this person sees a madman consumed by desire, they will pity him, for the more he pursues pleasure, the more he suffers. Based on the reasons just mentioned, understand that the body has the nature of suffering and is also the source of suffering. Mind without gender, Sariputra asked the female deity, "O deity, why don't you change your gender, since you are only a woman? For 12 years I have been searching for the attributes of a woman, but I have not seen them clearly. So, what should I change? For example, if a magician creates an illusory woman and asks her why she does not change her gender, would that request be correct or incorrect?" Sariputra replied, "Indeed, it is incorrect. An illusory creation does not possess distinct attributes that allow it to truly transform." The female deity then said, "Just like that, all phenomena lack distinct attributes, so why do you ask me why I do not change my body?" Immediately, the female deity used her power to switch forms with Sariputra, turning herself into Sariputra and Sariputra into herself, then asked Sariputra, who was in her form, "Now, why don't you change your gender?" Sariputra, seeing his ridiculous form, exclaimed, "I don't know if the transformation has truly occurred, but before my eyes I have become a woman." The female deity replied, "Sariputra, if you can change your gender, then all women can do the same. Sariputra, if you are not a woman but only possess the outward appearance of one, then all women are the same, only possessing the outward appearance of men. Therefore, the Buddha said that all phenomena do not possess male or female attributes." Then the female deity used her power to return Sariputra to his original form and asked, "Where is your female grace now?" "I have no female grace, and it is not found anywhere else. It is the same with all phenomena. They do not exist anywhere, nor do they exist anywhere else." This is what the Buddha taught. The Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva is very sensitive to the objects of the senses. But the Bodhisattva is also highly skilled in the art of focusing the mind. Thus, the Bodhisattva confounds the Mara demons, preventing them from causing chaos. It is wonderful when lotus flowers bloom in the red flame. But it is even more wonderful when focusing the mind amid the encirclement of desire. To some people, the Bodhisattva appears as a prostitute, only because the Bodhisattva wants to attract those captivated by lust. The Bodhisattva entices these people with the bait of desire before guiding them back to the wisdom of the Buddhas. Tantric Buddhism and sexuality. For a long time, there have been numerous misunderstandings and prejudices about Tantric Buddhism. First, Westerners often hastily view Tantric Buddhism as merely a technique applied in spiritual practice. In reality, Tantric Buddhism, also known as Vajrayana, directly derives from Mahayana and represents a comprehensive path to attaining Buddhahood. Tantric Buddhism is far more than a simple technique for liberating oneself from sexuality. The symbol of sexuality in Tantric Buddhism aims to illustrate the inseparable union of opposing forces within the mind, the universe, and reality. Thus, male deities in Tantric Buddhism symbolize skillful means in spiritual practice, while female deities represent wisdom or the understanding of emptiness, which validates the results achieved by these methods. In the spiritual realm, the polarized nature of sexuality indicates that the method, male aspect, can become highly dangerous if not directed towards expansion. Similarly, phenomena in the universe, male aspect, can only unfold within the open space, female aspect, that serves as the receptive foundation for these phenomena. Purification of consequences. The enlightened nature of the mind, which is the open space, female aspect, welcomes and integrates clarity, male aspect. The primary symbols of Vajrayana include the Vajra, a diamond scepter representing the male aspect, and the Gantar, a small bell representing the female aspect or universal polarity. The symbols of Buddhas depicted as the union of male and female deities do not imply indulgence, even if they are imbued with a sacred character. Regarding carnal sexuality in Japan, the orthodox Shingon and Tendai schools completely exclude tantric texts containing explicit symbols. In these schools, sexual symbols are presented very discreetly, with male and female deities placed side by side. These symbols are used as a technique to purify the effects and polluted perceptions of reality. However, in the 12th century, there was a deviant Shingon sect known as Tachikawa Ryu, which advocated using the blissful state of sexual union for achieving enlightenment. Taoism was more heavily influenced by these heretical interpretations of Tantric Buddhism, attracting many followers and flourishing greatly. Buddhist monks from various sects opposed this heresy in Taoism, leading to its prohibition in Japan in the 14th century, and Taoist texts were burned. In India and Tibet, tantric practices are deeply internal, allowing sexual symbols to be more explicitly displayed. However, union with a consort can only be considered a practice of enlightenment if the yogi has reached a very high level, with a solid foundation in understanding emptiness, developed compassion, mastery of visualization, mantra recitation, and yogic techniques of energy control. Viewing the use of sexuality as merely a technique for eliminating attachment to the mundane misses the essence of tantric practice. Therefore, it is not surprising that sexuality is used as a transformative means. Tantric Buddhism is a path advocating transformation, enabling practitioners to convert mental poisons into wisdom through powerful yogic methods. While ordinary worldly sexuality manifests desire and clinging to pleasure, Tantric Buddhism sanctifies this state, seeing it as an opportunity to experience bliss and completely replace the coarse state of mind with the pure state of the luminous clear light. Typically, this clear light only manifests at death, but mastery of sexual union can create a state similar to the mind leaving the body. Through yogic practices of short death and darkness of pleasure giving way to the dawn of the clear light, the yogi and the consort can achieve the awakening experienced at death. This is one of many examples highlighting how sexual energy aligns with the energy of death. A few words of advice. Buddhism uses a method of analysis to approach reality. This analysis moves in two different directions. One direction involves dissecting phenomena to their utmost limit, revealing their emptiness. The other direction involves a broad perspective that encompasses all phenomena, helping to observe the nature and universal laws that govern their operations, such as the principle of interdependence, pratitya-samutpada, the principle of impermanence, and the law of cause and effect. The articles above present some results derived from these methods of analysis and demonstrate that Buddhism does not seek to directly address the harmful effects of sexuality, nor does it blame the body as the basis for the emergence of lust. Instead, Buddhism analyzes further to show that all suffering and chaos are the consequences of attachment in the mind. Theravada Buddhism aims to prevent the harmful effects of sexuality through strict precepts and remedies. Mahayana Buddhism also uses precepts to limit the impact of sexuality, but simultaneously seeks to transcend sexuality, offering more flexibility in the ethical discipline of bodhisattvas, whether ordained or lay, to help them act more effectively. Tantric Buddhism, however, adopts a completely different approach by directly utilizing the energy of sexuality to guide practitioners toward enlightenment. Today, with the advancements in science, philosophy, sociology, etc., we have gained a richer understanding. Can this understanding contribute to Buddhism's goal of guiding us to a deeper comprehension of sexuality and its impacts, helping to limit its harmful and chaotic effects on society and individuals? To answer this question, let's analyze the causes of sexual impulses from a different perspective, beyond the physical and mental levels, by considering the concept of instinct. Indeed, we are constantly driven by various instincts. Among them, three primary instincts exert the most powerful influence: the desire to eat, the desire for sex, and the fear of death. The desire to eat is an expression of the survival instinct, leading to the protection of food, banks, money, wealth, competition, fraud, greed, stinginess, weapons, wars, robbery, wealth, poverty, excess. The desire for sex is the reproductive instinct, giving rise to jealousy, infatuation, heartbreak, happiness, sorrow, complexes, violence, suicide, imprisonment. This instinct manifests in myriad forms such as makeup, clothing, perfume, sentimental poetry, romantic music, pornography, romantic novels. The fear of death is the self-preservation instinct, leading to the development of various philosophies, religions, medicine, drugs, magic, immortality, elixirs, the creation of various paradises, all aiming to ensure continued existence in any form. In summary, the world of phenomena is incredibly complex. However, if we trace back the causes of phenomena, this tumultuous world is not that complicated. The instincts to eat, to reproduce, and to fear death affect, control, and drive all living beings, from humans and animals to insects and tiny creatures. In short, all sentient beings. The impact of these instincts creates attachment and bondage, leading to suffering. Where do these instincts come from? From fundamental ignorance, also known as primordial ignorance, which binds sentient beings to the cycle of existence. Being born as a human, we carry human instincts. Being born as an animal, we carry animal instincts. Personal karma adds diversity to all sentient beings. When we become aware that instincts are controlling and dominating us, we naturally seek to limit their influence to find freedom and liberation for ourselves. Simply put, if we have enough to eat, we do not need to be greedy, robbed, or wage wars to protect or accumulate wealth. If we wish to reproduce, we should look at the nearly 7 billion people suffering on this planet. If we fear death, it is futile because it is inevitable. Specifically regarding sexual instincts, Buddhist teachings have anticipated precepts to restrain and remedies to mitigate their impact. The precepts in Theravada Buddhism, such as those concerning the intentional or accidental emission of semen, might seem overly detailed or at least formalistic and attachment-prone. Mahayana Buddhism shows more leniency towards bodhisattvas, but one must be a bodhisattva to enjoy such leniency in precepts. The expansion of Tantric Buddhism is quite limited compared to other schools. The number of advanced practitioners who can harness the power of sexuality on the path to enlightenment is extremely rare. Practitioners can look to the example of the Dalai Lama, who practices Tantric Buddhism but is entirely celibate.